World War II. It's inspired more movies, books, and games than any other event in human history. Think about it, there's pretty much no shortage of World War II content, and especially now, it's really weaving itself into the gaming landscape. I mentioned World War II Online Choke Point a couple weeks ago, talking about a new Unreal Engine 5 World War II FPS that is coming to our screens in the next couple years. But it is based on one of the biggest and the most inspired titles of all time. Yes, I am talking about the original World War II Online, the biggest World War II MMO that actually you probably don't really know about too much these days. It went out of the limelight a while ago, hence why they're updating it. So this might be the first time you're hearing about the game, yet I'm sure there are many people that are part of the very hardcore fan base that have been around this title for the last 20 or so years. It's kind of a buried treasure these days because the game didn't exactly get the love it deserves. When it launched back in 2001, it was way ahead of its time. In fact, so ahead of its time that the 2001 technology still couldn't quite keep up with it. But here's the wild part. It is actually technically still alive. Yep, this 23-year-old MMO is still kicking, even getting a massive facelift with this next World War II Online update. This is the Unreal Engine 5 upgrade that I mentioned, which we'll get onto later within this video. So before this forgotten behemoth comes back swinging in the modern day, let's take a little stroll through history and talk about why World War II Online was way ahead of its time and why it is the biggest World War II MMO you forgot about. So what exactly was World War II Online trying to do? To put it bluntly, pretty much everything, and I do mean everything. Imagine this, an MMO where you don't just fight in small-scale battles, but you're part of an ongoing full-scale war that covers most of Europe. That's right, the game had a map of 300,000 square kilometers. You could literally start in London and fly to Berlin, fight a battle there, and go all the way back. With zero loading screens, no boundaries, just endless terrain, cities, and of course, other players. It sounds like something you'd expect in a modern day open world game, or at least something that modern day open world games even strive to do in 2024, yet still somehow fail. But no, this was 2001. For context, the internet was still making that charming dial-up screech every time you connected, and most games maxed out at 8 to 16 players per server. Meanwhile, WW2 Online was trying to support thousands of players in a single persistent world. The game was just built to be this ultimate war simulation. Not only could you play as infantry, but you could also jump into tanks, planes, and even naval ships. This wasn't your typical run and gun shooter either. You had to strategize and work with other players, coordinate large-scale offenses if you wanted to take over key cities or supply lines. And remember, this is all in a persistent world. What you did actually mattered. Conquering a city in today's match means that is your city until somebody takes it back. There is no game end. There is no time where you have to restart things. It goes on forever. The scale of the game was absolutely mind-blowing. Thousands of players all fighting in the same war with real-time consequences. And the best part, there were no real rules. No set levels, no linear progression. You could pretty much jump into any role you wanted and make a difference. Whether that was a grunt with a rifle or a bomber pilot wreaking havoc in the sky. But this is where things get even crazier. This wasn't just chaotic battlefield. World War II Online had a chain of command structure. Players could rise through the ranks and become generals, giving orders that impacted the entire campaign. It wasn't just about shooting straight or driving a tank, it was about coordination, strategy, and at times diplomacy. Imagine being in charge of an entire front of war, deciding whether your troops should go and what targets to prioritize. It all added to this new layer of depth that no shooter was even attempting at the time. Now, here's where things get complicated. While World War II Online was incredibly ambitious, and to some extent, they kind of pulled it off, overall, the execution was a little rough around the edges. And by rough, I mean it was a bit of a hot mess. The problem was the technology just wasn't there to support what the developers were trying to do. Remember, home broadband was still catching on at the time. Most people were rocking 56k modems, so imagine trying to run a massive real-time war simulation with thousands of players on the same server using dial-up internet. A lot of lag. That's what I'm trying to say. We're talking rubber banding so bad that soldiers looked like they were moving through molasses, bullets missing their targets, planes falling out the sky, and tanks getting stuck in the mud. Sometimes literally. And it wasn't just the lag. The game itself was buggy as hell back in the day. Some players couldn't even log in day one, and they were greeted by crashes, glitches, and all sorts of technical issues. To make matters worse, the learning curve was about as steep as climbing Mount Everest, barefoot. If you didn't know what you were doing, you'd quickly find yourself wandering around this huge map of, well, Europe. Lost and confused, probably then getting sniped from half a mile away. Just think about DayZ and the running simulator that is, and time DayZ's map by 30. I don't know if that's the maths. I can't be bothered to work it out. So for new players, it wasn't exactly the warmest welcome. The backlash from the players and reviewers was pretty swift at the time. Many couldn't get past the game's technical problems, and World War II Online ended up with some less than stellar reviews at launch. The critics were brutally calling it unplayable and a good idea ruined by poor execution. But despite the rough start, World War II Online wasn't this total disaster that I might have accidentally gone overboard making it out to be. In fact, it managed to carve out a dedicated niche of hardcore players, people who are willing to look past the technical problems because they love the idea of being part of this massive, persistent war. The players weren't looking for a quick run and gun action like Call of Duty. They wanted strategy, teamwork, and immersion. They wanted to feel like they were part of something bigger, and that's really where this game delivered. Over time, the developers worked tirelessly to patch the game and improve its stability. Slowly but surely, World War II Online became a more playable experience, and whilst it never quite shed its reputation as a buggy mess, people who stuck around didn't really care that much. For them, this was the ultimate World War II sandbox, and they loved it for all its quirks and challenges. And here's the thing. This wasn't just a game. It became a community. Players would organize massive operations, coordinate attacks on key cities, and strategize like real-life generals. It was a game where teamwork and communication were more important than twitch reflexes. If you wanted to succeed, you had to rely on your fellow soldiers. It was the sense of camaraderie and collaboration that we tend to see more in games these days than we ever did. Yet, as the 2000s rolled on, we started to see modern FPSs. You know, your Medal of Honors, your Call of Duties, your Battlefields, and these started to really dominate the market. It was clear that whilst there was a community for World War II Online and its slow, strategic, not very pretty, but incredibly large-scale warfare, most people wanted something they could jump in and not feel like they were walking in a real-world game. And this meant games like Call of Duty rose to dominance with their cinematic campaigns and really tight multiplayer. So titles like World War II Online faded further into the distance. Sure, it had its dedicated fan base, but it wasn't the mainstream. And especially for a huge World War II title, an MMO, they needed more than what they had. Yet just when you thought the game was down for the count, me making a video about a 23-year-old game, now it's more relevant than ever. It's coming back with a vengeance. That's right, World War II Online 2.0 is on the way, and the developers aim to bring this old warhorse back into the modern age. So what is the deal with it? Well, it's getting a massive overhaul thanks to Unreal Engine 5. That's right, the game that used to look like a 90s tech demo is about to get a facelift. And we're talking about some of the most realistic graphics in the business. If you thought Hell Let Loose and Postscriptum looked good, they're hoping to make World War II Online even better because it's on Unreal. I've mentioned Unreal Engine 5. I talk about it too much. But it is not just about looks. At least that's what my ex-girlfriend said. The core of the game is still going to be this massive persistent war. Thousands of players and strategic gameplay. It will still be there. In fact, the developers are doubling down on it because of this new modern technology that can actually support it. Think about it, an MMO war simulation where you can fight in land, sea, and air across a gigantic map of Europe, all in real time with no loading screens, you know, like PlanetSide 2 meets Hell Let Loose, with Unreal Engine 5's graphics. It's going to be gorgeous, and if they can pull it off, it's going to be one of the most impressive titles ever. In fact, the first thing they're going to be working on is World War II Online Choke Point, which is kind of your Hell Let Loose Squad 44 smaller scale version of their big MMO. They will be working alongside to test and tech demo things before putting it into the MMO, which, you know, admittedly is still years down the line. So if it's so far away, why would you still care? Well, here's the thing. World War II Online was a fantastic title back in the day because of its ambition. Not because it was the most polished or the most well-executed title ever, but it was the blueprint for a lot of modern war games. Long before PlanetSide 2, Arma, or even Battlefield, WW2 Online was doing large-scale persistent warfare on a scale that nobody else had attempted. It laid the foundation for modern war simulations, even if it didn't quite get the recognition it deserved. In fact, if you look at some of the most popular tactical shooters out today, Hell Let Loose, Squad 44, you can see the DNA of World War II Online within them. The emphasis on teamwork, strategy, large-scale warfare, that's all straight out of this 2001 title's playbook. So now, with the 2.0 update on its way, there's a chance for this community to finally fulfill its original potential, combining the best elements of World War II games with realistic graphics, smooth gameplay, and tactical depth with the sheer scale and ambition of the developers that made something way ahead of its time. So whilst it may have been forgotten by the mainstream, it is not over yet. Those who have been there since the beginning are potentially going to get the thing that they've all been waiting for. Whether you're a hardcore fan of tactical shooters or just someone that loves a good comeback story, I would keep an eye on this game because, well, this could be one of the most special things we've had in gaming, full stop.